In this presentation, we'll speak about media conglomerates. It's a term that you may or may not be familiar with, but it's really important for us to have a good understanding of when we're talking about media literacy. The more entities a company owns, especially in the media world, the more likely they're going to be able to control the conversation, prevent bad things from being said about them, get more good things said about them. It really puts the control in their hands once you have, ownership of the media. In fact, that leads us to our great quote here by the singer Jim Morrison, a legendary singer from the 60s and the band The Doors. Had a wonderful quote here. Whoever controls the media controls the mind, right? He may have said this back in the 60s, but it's absolutely true today. If you have a strong voice in media, whether that's the news media, entertainment, or another part of the media, that will generally give you great influence over the behaviors of society at large. If you look at today's news landscape, you're not seeing impartial and independent reporting of news. You're seeing a lot of news networks, papers, and websites that are, acting in a partisan way, speaking in support of specific political parties, helping out big business and certain brands that they have professional ties to. Lots of things happening there that don't align with what we generally like to see. If you look to the world of entertainment, most any form of media you consume is filled with commercials, but also with sponsor names, with influencer activity, with links to purchase products. It's probably rare for you to actually consume something just for the sole purpose of entertainment where you're not seeing pre-roll ads, right, on YouTube, or seeing, as you scroll through your Instagram feed, some sort of an influencer who's linking you out to sell you something, commercials on TV, things like that. It's everywhere. And those media messages, they're heavily focused on selling you products, services, and ideas. And one primary reason for that is the rise of media conglomerates. Let's talk about what media conglomerates are. They're large companies that own multiple media outlets. For example, a conglomerate might own television networks, websites, newspapers, and radio stations. The more media outlets a company owns, the more they can influence media messages and in turn influence public thought. They can use their media outlets to promote their own products, services, political preferences, and other interests. They can also use their media outlets to cover up mistakes or other bad actions. If you put too much control in the hands of too few companies, I really believe it can be quite dangerous for the public's well-being. There's really a handful of companies that control the majority of the media activity that's out there right now. There's four big ones that we'll key on here in this presentation: Disney, Comcast, Viacom, CBS, and AT&T. If one of these companies is doing something wrong, who's going to report it if they're the ones who own all the media, right? Is a local station going to call out Viacom if they've done something wrong, if their CEO is involved in a scandal, right? If AT&T is engaged in some sort of bad business practice, is an AT&T owned news outlet going to report on that? If they do, is it going to be factual and direct reporting, or is it going to cover up for them? If these companies want us to buy their products and services or to vote in a way that aligns with their interest, how much power do we actually have to stop them, right? Disney could be releasing a new movie that we've got very little interest in initially, but once we start to see that repeated across media platform on signs, billboards, etc., the stars are interviewed on the local morning news show. You can start to see how they roll all that power up together and start to change your level of interest, right? So that movie you weren't too interested in seeing initially becomes something that you can't wait for opening day of. So let's take a closer look at who these companies are, what they own, and how they might influence us. Disney, everyone's familiar with the Disney brand name. They're familiar with all the different brand names listed on this slide, but you may not realize that Disney owns all of these, right? Some are obvious because they've got Disney in the name. Obviously, Disney owns Disney Plus streaming network, the Walt Disney Studios, the Disney Cruise Line, the Disney Stores, Disney Parks. But as you look at just all those things with the Disney name attached to it, you can start to see how if they want to promote something, they've got an endless amount of ways to push that out to you, right? So if they've got a new movie being released through Walt Disney Studios and you're on a Disney cruise, you're probably going to see some sort of signage for that somewhere. Maybe a character from that movie is roaming the cruise ship, right? You'll probably see some commercials and advertisements on Disney Plus for it, right? You'll see the merchandise in Disney Plus or Disney stores, and there'll probably be billboard signs all over Disney parks promoting it too. But it's not just Disney Studios they can do that with. They own a stake in Hulu, right? So they can promote things through there. They own Lucasfilm, who's behind Star Wars. You probably knew that one already. ESPN, which has not only the ESPN television networks, but the ESPN Plus streaming service, ESPN Radio, A&E networks, Pixar, FX networks, Hollywood Records. It's not all just movie studios and television networks. They've got a musical arm there as well. And this slide does not encompass everything that Disney owns, nor does it encompass everything that these other conglomerates own. It's really just a sampling of some of the bigger names that you're going to know. But again, you can start to go through the exercise of seeing, hey, if they've got something that they want to promote, a new show on ABC, look at all the different places they can push that from. And that is going to have a cumulative effect on you as a consumer. You may start off with little interest in something, and they've got enough power here to manipulate you into wanting to give them your money. This slide is just expanding on that idea here and really talking about the unique, diverse array of industries Disney owns, right? The idea of having not just television stations, but also movie studios, theme parks, retail stores, record companies, etc., really gives Disney an incredible breadth of power. Quite shrewd of them from a business perspective to build this incredible monolith, but also quite frustrating and daunting for the consumer who wants to remain independent. Children and teenagers, I think especially, are susceptible to Disney's influence, because even if you're not into, Disney princesses, Mickey Mouse, those traditional trappings of Disney, there's everything that they own through ESPN, right? So if you're a big basketball fan, they're going to have a lot of power over you, right? If you enjoy the music that Disney artists are putting out, they're going to have a lot of power over you. Very involved in kind of setting cultural standards that younger people are going to be influenced by. Viacom CBS, here's a great example where you probably did not realize that these different brands and different companies are all affiliated under one umbrella. You've got CBS, who you know for news and television shows, things like that. But then you've also got Simon & Schuster, right, a book publishing arm. You've got the CW network, the Nickelodeon networks, Pluto TV, a streaming service, Bellator MMA, right, a mixed martial arts fighting organization, the Paramount Plus streaming service. Lots of different media opportunities for them to promote things to you, to push things in front of you, to manipulate the news in whatever manner that they want. Different array of entities here than we see with Disney, but extremely powerful nonetheless. Comcast, very similar here, a very heavy, I would say, TV presence here and some streaming as well, right? You've got Comcast Cable, you've got Peacock, the new streaming service that was recently released, DreamWorks Studios, Infinity Internet, Fandango Movie Ticketing Company, the NHL Network, E Network, NBC Sports. They own a sports venue, the Wells Fargo Center. They own the Philadelphia Flyers hockey team. This is a really unique one because not only because they own Xfinity and Comcast Cable and Comcast Internet, not only can they control messages that are being pushed out, but they own the vehicles that the media is being pushed out through as well. So, not just creating content and pushing that to you, but controlling the pipes that it's flowing through and controlling your internet access. Very unique position that they have there. AT&T is kind of similar in that regard, right? You've got AT&T cell phones, you've got AT&T Uverse with cable and internet access, and then you've got all these different media properties that they can push content through, right? So HBO, TNT, Cartoon Network, DC Comics and their movie entities, Castle Rock Entertainment, big movie studio, Turner Sports, covering the sports angle there, Bell South, which has been phone company, communication, and internet type of company there. So again, they also have this unique position of creating a lot of content, but also controlling the distribution platforms. So they could block out their competitors if they wanted, right? And keep someone else from pushing content out to you because they own those pipes. Just an incredible amount of control that they have over you, the consumer, and what you can see, and by proxy, potentially. While conglomerates are incredibly powerful, and they built their power by acquiring and merging together different media entities that have proven very strong in the past, television networks, newspapers, radio stations, and now websites as well, we really can't overlook the importance of big tech, companies that have built up incredible abilities to look at, monitor, and leverage consumer behavior in a big way. Very important players in the world of media literacy, and definitely someone that's worth talking about. They may at this point be more powerful than their conglomerate contemporaries. When we're talking about big tech, we're talking about Facebook, Google, Amazon, Netflix, Spotify, places like that, or sites and apps like that, things that you're using on a daily basis. They've made several acquisitions themselves. So if you look at Facebook, they acquired Instagram, right? Google's made many acquisitions over time. Spotify hasn't so much acquired as their tech partners as they have key players in the podcast space, right? So acquiring the Ringer network, acquiring the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. Those have all been great acquisitions for them in terms of trying to build up a stronger profile and acquiring new users for their platform. So through these acquisitions and just through the development of their own technology, these big tech companies are able to survey so much information about us. Think about using Facebook, for instance, or Instagram for that matter. They are able to see every post that you like, everything that you interact with, every person that you follow, every person that you even view without following, who you're responding to, etc. They're capturing all of that information, right? It's certainly not a person sitting in a room looking at all of that and saying Joe Smith is doing this, that, and the other. But there's technology behind it that's capturing all of that information. And they're taking that information to serve up more things to you that they think you're going to like. They're doing that because they want you to spend as much time on their sites as possible so that they can serve more ads up to you and so that you'll click on more ads. That's how they make their money, through showing ads to you and through selling advertising as well. So it's really in their benefit to figure out exactly what you like and to serve that information up to you. You may or may not realize that they can do that, but you also may not realize that they can take that information then and sell it to other advertisers. So if you are Target, for instance, and you want to sell a new line of footwear that's carried in your stores, you've got all kinds of ways to look for specific audiences that are interested in footwear, interested in the type of footwear that you sell, the price points, etc. You can look for people who like brands that are similar to this new line of shoes that you're rolling out. You can look at people who already shop at Target, or maybe you're trying to go up market a little bit. You can look at people who like brands that are a little bit more exciting than Target, and then you can target those people specifically. You can look at their ages. You can look at groups that they belong to. What celebrities and entertainers they like, what their hobbies are, etc. Think of it this way: anything that you're putting in to a Facebook profile, anything that you're doing on Facebook, anything that you're doing on Instagram, all that information is then available to advertisers in order to be able to better pinpoint their advertising to people that they think are most likely to respond to it. That's how that whole ecosystem works. It's why it's incredibly effective. If you're in advertising, one of the very best ways you can spend your money is to put your products into Facebook ads, Instagram ads, etc. And that makes for a very powerful thing for these companies to be able to know what you're doing and to sell that information on to their advertising partners. One of the other important things to keep in mind about big tech is that they change culture and they change behaviors in a way that media conglomerates don't. Media conglomerates create all of their influence over us by acquiring lots of different places that we consume media and catering to our behaviors that already exist by trying to be where we're already at. These big tech companies are creating new ways for us to act, new behaviors for us to engage in, new habits, new likes, hobbies, etc. If you think about it, and you may not be old enough to remember this, but there certainly was a time where there was no Facebook. So the idea of staying in touch with friends, family, etc., through Facebook, that didn't exist, and there was no other way to do it. Right? Prior to Instagram, Facebook, etc., there was no way to sit and look through a bunch of photos that someone had taken and really understand who they were, what was going on in their life, keeping in touch with them, etc. This is all new stuff in terms of being able to do it without actually being in the same room as somebody or sending something through the mail. This is all new stuff that these big tech companies have created. The same is true for Snapchat, just evolving on that, right? The same is true for Google, they didn't create search engines, but they certainly made them better, and more efficient, more effective. So they created behaviors there. Alexa is a really great example of that. The idea of being able to find information just by speaking, that's something that wasn't really happening before they came along. So the process for these companies is really to build these products and services and tech tools that facilitate new behaviors, things that teach us new ways to act and make us love it so much that we don't want to live without it, and then capture the information that we pass along while we're doing these new things, and use that to serve up advertising, to partner up with media companies and advertisers, et cetera. And then once we've got that behavior ingrained with us, it's really hard for us to give that up. And then once Google has built an ecosystem like that for search engines, once they've built the best search engine and made it a habit so that everyone is using search engines many times per day, as opposed to asking someone for information, looking it up in a book, et cetera. Why would you ever do any of that when Google's so convenient and so accurate? Once they've built up that behavior, they can put their advertising in place and they can set whatever rules for it they want. They don't have to play by the same rules as a television company, a newspaper, et cetera. So they consolidate all that power into their own ecosystem, which really is a great setup for them. The same thing with Facebook, the same thing with Alexa, any sort of new and disruptive technology. Once the companies have built this habit and this new behavior, they're able to set the rules around how they're going to charge for advertising, how they can monetize it, et cetera. Touched on this before, but these companies are tracking our behavior in really detailed ways. Anything that you do on a website, a phone, or another digital platform, just realize that it's being tracked. You may not realize that that's happening, or you may kind of know that it's happening, but not to the extent. Consider anything that you are putting online, looking at online, doing digitally as something that can be seen by one of these companies and used to benefit them and benefit their advertising partners. You've got to think of that in all the time. And I mentioned examples earlier where a company might want to get you to buy a product based on the history that they see you exhibit in your web browsing, in your Facebook and Instagram usage, and your Spotify usage, et cetera. But that's also being used to shape the way that people think, right? One of the big factors in swaying opinions in the 2016 election was that there were a lot of groups who were, especially on the Republican side of the table, who were very adept at looking at conversations that were happening in social media, using all of that information about audiences and understanding, what messages they'd be receptive to, what would really strike an emotional chord with them, what would scare them, et cetera, and building out new messages for that, right? So, if I'm trying to get somebody to vote for my candidate, I can certainly talk about all the good things that they're going to do, what they stand for, what their platform is, their great record in public service, and hopefully that will sway some people's opinions. But an even faster way to sway people's opinions is to say that the opponent of my political candidate is going to do something horrible that you're going to hate, that attacks your core values, that you just simply cannot live with, and scare you into voting for my person instead of the other person because of this big fear factor. The web and social media are great places to stoke those fear fires, to identify what's happening there, and then to target it. So I come up with a fake news story. I look for people who are looking at other websites, following other politicians, other media personalities, things like that, that are going to be really receptive to my fake news story. I target them with it, and then I put a few $1,000s towards promoting some ads that push my story out in front of them. People start clicking, people's minds start changing. All of a sudden, the prospects for my political candidate are looking better and better. So this can be used to manipulate your purchase decisions, your personal thoughts, your political activities. It really is. I've used the word powerful many times, but it really is incredibly powerful. We have not seen anything like this really in the history of human civilization. So some concluding thoughts here on the idea of media conglomerates. They have a direct link to media literacy. I think you probably understand that by now. They have this size, reach, and scale that allows them to synergize their messages across many platforms and influence consumer behavior in a meaningful way. Meaning, if Disney wants to promote a movie, it has 35 different places that it can promote that movie. So the odds of you not seeing some sort of commercial, interview, web advertisement, etc., are pretty slim. If they want to get something in front of you and try and influence your behaviors, they're going to be able to do that. Big tech might be even more powerful than conglomerates because of the rich amounts of data that it holds about every user. They know everything that we like and dislike, what we're doing, what time of the day we're doing it, who we're interacting with. They're capturing all of that information, maybe not on a person's name basis, but in a way that they're able to come back and target us with advertising that's all intended to manipulate our behavior. Now, candidly, there's nothing we can do to stop the rise of conglomerates. This has been happening for decades. There's nothing we can do to stop the rise of big tech. This has been happening for 15 years now, maybe 20 at this point. But what we can do is be really careful to understand the relationships that exist between these different companies, relationships that exist between these companies and brands, how brands can use big tech, how politicians can use big tech, how special interest groups can leverage big tech and conglomerates. Be aware of all that and really scrutinize messages heavily. Do not take the things you're seeing at face value, especially if they're promising you some amazing product, if they're promising you, some horrible thing is going to happen politically or socially. These things are all worth a second and third look. Practice skepticism around messages. Talk to your friends, even talk to your family, and keep in mind, all this information that they're collecting when you use your phone, your laptop is empowering all of this sort of fake news type activity happening. So it's really important for us to understand all those things, be vigilant. We cannot stop conglomerates or big tech, but we can be aware of what they do and try to guard ourselves against it. Thanks for your time.